Hello, humans. Welcome to the M-Word podcast. Brought to you by Martin. That's me.
And Matt.
That's him. I'm Matt. Matthew.
Martin.
Joined by Graham today as well. Welcome, Graham.
Hello.
Thanks for your time.
Not a problem.
Everyone well?
Good.
Graham?
Good.
Yeah. Everyone sounds hesitant. So, let's start early. Are you a Manxie?
I am. I grew up near Fleswick Bay.
All right, Southern boy.
Southern boy.
Right,
So-
okay. And what was early childhood like?
Uh,
Schooling down south, I assume?
Play school in Port St Mary.
Right,
Russian Junior. Then off to Castle Russian.
right, okay.
So.
And much going on in those early years?
Yeah.
Good child, were you?
Pardon?
Good child?
No, not at all.
Were you not?
I was often described as a bad boy.
Oh, right,
which was
okay.
like from I remember play school and spending most of my life in the naughty corner.
Oh, right,
And
okay.
then my journey through school wasn't the easiest. So.
Right, okay. Why particularly?
When I was really badly dyspraxic.
What's dyspraxic?
Clumsy kid disease.
Okay.
Mum was really not well when I was little, and lots of other things going on. So,
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And they just manifest into bad behaviour.
Yeah, bad behaviour and classic middle child syndrome. So,
Oh, right,
Okay.
okay.
so
when you talk about middle child syndrome, that's ignored, is it?
yeah. So later you as you get older and your interests, you begin to notice patterns.
Right, okay.
Middle children often choose the wrong path in life for
Right.
various reasons.
Right,
So,
okay. So during those more disruptive times at school, were you just, well, it's easy looking back, but at the time, do you think, is that attention seeking or just acting out? Or
I think it was acting out. I think it was didn't understand the world. Also, being really badly dyslexic back in the 70s, you were considered thick,
Yeah,
so
right.
I went to special measures, what they called special lessons now, and
right.
my journey, as I said, my journey through school wasn't the easiest.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Was that just because of lack of knowledge or understanding back then?
I think it was also the policies and the procedures of the government.
Right.
So if you look back at the 80s, the rest of the world had already started to recognise dyslexia and dyspraxia, while the Manx Department of Education refused to accept it,
Right.
which was the choice of the head educational psychologist. So.
Right. And would there be bullying going on then for
Oh
those?
yeah.
Right,
So
okay.
I was badly
So that
bullied.
was, and that's
So-
your kickback then, as part of that, I presume. That,
Yeah, so I got bullied when I was at school and then became the bully. So,
Oh, right,
yeah.
okay, right.
So.
Again, probably a subconscious thing that's going on, I guess.
Yeah, and it's like you end up getting fed up of being a victim, and the easiest way to stop being a victim
Go
is
on the
probably
attack,
go on the attack.
Yeah,
So.
right. And I presume then schooling-wise and getting an education, then just obviously, one, you're not getting the support you need, and then because you're acting out, it just becomes a vicious circle of getting less education, I guess.
It was
More detention.
more detentions, more canes.
Yeah, right.
But it was also that I didn't understand what they wanted me to do.
Okay.
So if you don't understand you don't understand what they're trying to teach you, how can you learn it?
Right.
So I scraped through.
Right.
You
Well, you haven't got I suppose I use the word intelligent, but the awareness to talk about that to them, it's only in hindsight that
So when I was 35, I was diagnosed with really bad dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, straight ADHD,
Right,
and had to learn to read and write again.
right, okay. Is that done a different way then?
So it was done in a different way with a really good dyslexia specialist.
Okay.
When I was 40, I started a master's degree without a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
I'm now 49 next week, and I'm year 2 of a PhD.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
So,
yeah,
if you're given the tools, you can flourish.
Yeah,
If you're not
yeah.
given the tools, you're
Are those tools in the environment now in school?
I don't really know. I would have hoped so.
Yeah, you'd like to.
But you don't know, do you?
Yeah, yeah. So through those school years, you come out of school, what happened? What did you go into work?
So
Bit of anything?
So left school when I was 18 with 2 really not very good A levels. Went off to college for a few months.
So back then was A levels like I know A levels as you go through GCSEs 16 and then A levels.
Okay, so I was the first year of GCSEs.
Okay.
There you go. There's an interesting fact. Then 2 years of A levels, and then I went off to college, which I dropped out of. Didn't suit me. By that time, I was drinking and taking drugs and getting into grief.
You're hanging around with the wrong people as well. Or were you the wrong person?
I was the wrong person.
They were hanging around with you, the wrong person.
I was often described as the one your mother warned you about.
Right.
Okay.
Why did you start taking them? Just for fun?
Pain relief. So I suppose I was drinking to oblivion by the time I was 14.
Oh, right. Wow.
16.
Who's buying you that drink? Anyone who was around?
stealing.
Did you have older mates as well?
Yeah.
Right.
Got into smoking weed and taking speed and acid
Right.
by the time I was 16, 17.
Did it ever scare you when you kind of presented those to do?
No. You know, some of us naturally take risks.
Right.
Because it makes you feel alive. You know, the closer to death you are, the more alive you feel.
Yeah. And was that
Did it
your
work?
was that your not so much intention? Was that kind of what you were just doing it for? Then should we say?
Was it you do? With hindsight, yeah. You know, I've been on a very long journey since then. Some of it was about numbing the pain. Some of it
You didn't know that at the time, though.
No, I didn't know it at the time. Some of it was about wanting to fit in, somewhere to belong. You know, if you've got nowhere to belong, the only people who will allow you to belong with them are the druggies, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, it's somewhere to belong. And, you know, my life was constantly in chaos, you know, with the drink and the drugs and everything else. I mean, you know, by the time I was 20, I was completely messed up, you know.
So in those circumstances, well, if there is some and bits I've read and listened to where you maybe in that period when there is something stable, is it unknown, but there's that instinct and you just F it up because normal isn't just if you've got a girlfriend at 18, you want to have a, quote, a normal relationship. You would shit on the relationship because your instinct is not you train your brain or your brain becomes trained that normal and good isn't what I deserve almost, so subconsciously you F things up.
So if you think about how your brain works and how you relate to yourself, okay, if your brain works differently in how you relate to yourself, so that's your emotions, that's your sense of self, maybe that's your sexuality, maybe that's your five senses, how you relate to them mirrors into how you relate to the world.
Right.
So if you've had trauma, how you relate to all those different things inside of you is usually messed up.
Right.
Therefore, how you relate to the world is also messed up.
Right.
So if you've had what within psychology is called adverse childhood experiences, if you start looking at dyslexia, dyspraxia, mental health in before the age of 18, and then had a drug taken and drink, all of a sudden, how you relate to yourself is completely messed up.
Right.
Therefore, how you try to relate to the world is completely messed up. And you don't understand it because lots of the things in the world are very subtle. And one of the things that happens if you've had trauma is you become numb. So how can you understand culture, which is very subtle, if you're numb? You can't.
Right. So that when you talk about trauma, you talk about your initially, I suppose, getting bullied.
Not being able to fit in, mum being ill, you know, all those things that happen in life.
Yeah. So then, I mean, skipping way forward, and I don't want to come back, but then the process down the road is to deal with that, understand why those happens, I guess, therapy or however that's dealt with, to then understand why you were the way you were. I guess that's part of the healing curve, is it?
So I'm a therapist.
Right.
So I get the therapeutic side. At the same time, it has to be balanced. So lots of people who go through adverse childhood experiences don't understand how society works. So you actually have to relearn you have to learn how society works. So you have to develop a thing called social capital, which is how to have healthy relationships, how to have, understand how culture works, which for people who haven't been really traumatized, they they don't understand how complex some of that is.
Yeah. Looking back at later in life, when you look at that earlier trauma, is there situations or is there times when you're angry with the people around you that didn't? Because I always feel in a healing process, there's always, and it's only my observations, or not always, but there's often a look back, and I believe self-responsibility is the biggest thing.
Oh, yeah.
But there's often external factors.
There's it's the balance between taking personal responsibility, but also about in a way, the society taking responsibility for its failings.
Yeah.
You know, and in some ways, you know, you hope that kids 6, 7, 8 going through what I did 40 years ago don't get the same treatment as I got. You know, so you know all
so
the.
I talk about the anger of the. I use the word society, but maybe the setup of schools back then, for example.
So, you know, so angry people change the world. Okay, think of Martin Luther King, angry, Malcolm X, and Nelson Mandela, all very, very angry men in their youth. They learnt to focus their anger for change, which is a good thing. If I look back to before I was 35, I was most probably one of the angriest people you'd ever meet.
Right. Yeah.
No, I could walk into a room and I didn't even have to say anything and it would kick off. Yeah.
Does it feel like a different life looking back now? Or different person? Well, clearly it is a different person in some context other than
there's more
being.
of me now. There's
Yeah.
more of me now.
Right.
You know, when I was 22, I set fire to myself.
Oh, right, okay. For what purpose?
To kill myself.
Okay,
yeah.
right. That's a rough way to try and kill yourself.
Oh, yeah. And then
there's a lot of less rough ways. I was going to say there's no great way, but that's a pretty rough way.
And then the next 4 years, I
Is that drug induced, that process that's going on?
So between 18 and 22, I kept failing because of the chaos of my life. And
failing being holding down jobs.
Hold down relationships.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And
were you angry with the world at that stage in your life?
I was raging.
Yeah, right. Everyone else's fault but yours.
Yeah. The drink and the drugs was about numbing the rage and numbing the pain and numbing the washing machine in your head.
Okay. What I presume there's a psychology behind why people, because on the outside, you look at that situation again. I'm talking off the top of my head here, but you look and think, well, that's not the way to do it. But I assume when you're in the moment, there's a psychology of.
So there's a difference, and this is maybe there's a difference between psychology and lived experience. Okay, so psychology often today is very behaviorist, which is harm management. Okay, which is about managing the harm you do to yourself and to others, which is the vast majority of psychology that's taught. So if you have an experience of the washing machine in your head, which sounds also like voices, you have hallucinogenics, see things, the world stops being real and what's going on in your side of your head becomes more real than what's outside.
Mm-hmm.
Setting fire to yourself sounds a pretty cool plan, you know. Okay. Between 22 and 26, I really don't know how many times I tried to kill myself. I was sectioned, I was put in seclusion, I was on 16, 17 different drugs a day, plus whatever illicit drugs I could get. And it was just chaos. Being sectioned and being labelled crazy is a great place to be because you have no responsibility.
And that worked for you at the time?
And that worked for me. Didn't stop me causing mayhem in the lunatic asylum. But yeah, it was, for me, it was,
and even during that time, there was no thought in your mind there that maybe going sectioned and all this sort of thing is maybe there's a reason society or whoever is looking outside to you was thinking there's a reason I'm being put down this route.
So if you're in a world of pain and everything, you have no control of what's going on around you, and you're feeling attacked, you withdraw within to the world that's inside your head, maybe. What's going on around you no longer matters,
So,
because it's not real.
yeah. So even whatever setting you were, whether it's your house, whether it was the pub, whether
Yeah.
it was this institute, wherever it was,
Yeah.
to you, say, it didn't matter because
What was in my head was more real than outside.
Yeah, right.
And I was pumped full of antipsychotics, anti-mood stabilizers, anti-anxieties, antidepressants. I did the whole thing for 4 or 5 years.
Did you take them? Obviously, their prescription given to you, but did you want to take them to try and? I suppose they are in essence trying to help you. Whether your view is whether they did, but would you get them and then hide them, or would you get them and take them?
When you're sectioned, you're
Forced to take them.
You're forced to take them.
Yeah.
You're watched while you take them. They give you injections. Strangely,
And were you always pushing back still during this?
it depends on what they gave me.
All right. What have you got there before I take it?
I was going to say, did you notice a difference to what these drugs were doing to your mindset, your mentality at that point?
Okay. So, during the time I was really, really heavily medicated, it slowed you down physically. So you couldn't. It was a chemical kosh. So they don't use straitjackets anymore. They give you an injection. Okay. But the interesting bit for me, when I set fire to myself, I was just really, really, really badly depressed. They gave me an Prozac. And for the next 4 years, I acted out constantly. They took me off Prozac and I was released from the mental health wards 2 weeks later.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was never, it's a very strange coincidence. You put someone on Prozac and then you take them off a certain drug and they get out.
Yeah.
I still have the scars on the side of my mouth. So when they really medicate you, you start to dribble.
All right.
And you'll always tell people who have been on the old-fashioned, heavy-duty antipsychotics, because we all have little scars in the sides of our mouths. And they used to give you drops to stop the infections.
All right. Wow.
It was properly really heavy medication for quite a long time.
And all this is, I assume, happening on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
So during that sort of late teen, early family-wise, were the family and I use the word friends in the sense of what you'd like to, maybe the people you're doing drugs with maybe were your friends. I don't know, but was there people around shaking you, going, "Look, you're being a douche. You need to sort yourself out," or you just can't even, because you surround yourself with the wrong people by nature. Then
it's that if people are filling you full of drugs to numb you, you don't actually remember too much.
No.
So I do have memories, and I remember the people I was hanging around with, and I still see them. I still see them in Douglas, and it's really interesting that 20 years later they're still all highly medicated up. They're all, it's that. If you treat mental health and if you treat suicide and addiction as a medical problem and just manage the harm, it's a revolving door. If you go down the other route, which is more a social or a more relational way of working, people step out and there's a natural healing that can occur.
Right. So that way that's historically been dealt with, is there a general view in the world through papers, etc., that this is the path people need to start looking more down?
So it's more than just papers. So there's a massive amount of evidence now.
Right.
So I'm in the middle of doing a PhD, and all the, if you look around the world, if you look into the UK, there's this, what they're calling the recovery model.
Right.
Excuse me, I'm going to cough.
No. Okay.
Which is about building 5 capitals into people's lives, and they naturally get well, whether that's addiction, whether that's offending, whether that's mental health.
Is that implemented a lot, or I assume not enough?
So
I don't know.
New Zealand's taken it on board. The States and North America and Canada have done massive amounts of work. UK's been doing it for about 5-10 years.
Okay.
So if you look around the world, it's very much everything's becoming recovery. So recovery fits in within strength-based practice. Okay?
Within
strength-based practice.
strength, right?
So strength-based and asset-based practices, everybody has assets and everybody has strengths. If you build on them, their problems become what's the word I'm looking for? But less powerful. So it's like a set of scales.
Okay.
So if you've got loads and loads of problems with no good stuff, it's completely out of balance. If you build loads of good stuff into someone's life, the bad stuff just becomes meaningless, doesn't it?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's all about relationship. It's all about people having a really good relationship with themselves and also having a really good relationship with the society they live in, not about medicating.
So to go back, when you look at those 1 to 18 years and the fallout you had, do you think if that was the next person down the road, as in just another person that went through that same experience 1 to 18, do you think the fallout, each person's fallout is different just based on their makeup, I wouldn't say their environment, but yeah, maybe their environment as well.
So in some ways it's about. So if you look at this thing called adverse childhood experiences, they have another thing called resilience, the resilience score. So if you build loads of resilience into people's lives, young people's lives, if they have high ACE scores, what happens is they have less of an effect.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so
it's that balance of scales.
So
almost.
it's balance.
Yeah,
so
if
you build
kind of good stuff.
So if you build loads of good stuff in,
Yeah.
and there's a list of like 30 things I think
Okay.
now. If you build that into kids' lives, the adverse childhood experiences have far less of an effect.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
but going back to what you just said, everybody manifests in different ways. So I manifested in one way. My brother manifested in another way. I have friends who went through far worse than what I went through, and they manifested in a different way. But as you get older, those pathways become drink, drugs, gambling, crime, and then you all get labelled, and you all start down the same path.
Yeah, and I assume there's a follow-on from if you commit a crime, you're going to jail. You look back now and look at that's not a rehabilitation place.
So I've been through prison, both on the Isle of Man and in away.
Is the system fundamentally wrong? Not fundamentally, because
Okay,
but
so
your
what-
observations
okay,
of
so-
having been through that experience.
Okay, so what's prison for?
Well, yeah, as an
Okay.
observer, it's you kind of
Is
think it should be punishment, but really it should be about rehab.
Okay,
If that's possible.
So if you start looking at the stats, if you're dyslexic, if you have ADHD, if you're a care leaver,
What's a care leaver? Sorry.
someone who's been through the care system
Okay,
as a kid,
right, yeah.
if you have a score more than 5 or 4, all of a sudden you've got 95% of the population of a prison.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is really interesting, and then the more of those you have, the more likely, and there's a direct relationship to the length of your sentence.
Right.
That's that's really, 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 really clear research. So if you start looking at people stopping offending, so there's a project over in Blackpool. It's called, what's it called? Jobs, Fronts and Houses. Okay, recovery, strength-based approach to people coming out of prison. So, 100 worst offenders coming out of prison in Blackpool in 1 year. So they give them somewhere steady to live, steady job, put them on an 8-week course, and gave them a job looking after social housing. Okay, what was the reported drop in crime by those 100 worst offenders in Blackpool in the first year?
Go on.
96% reported by the police, not self-reported. So do you think 100 worst offenders on the Isle of Man, by building those recovery capitals into their lives, it's just you take away all the crime?
Yeah. And is that mechanism not there enough? I assume.
No,
you kind of spat out of the prison system and left to it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I've been spat out of the prison system.
Right.
Yeah. So if your underlying ethos is managing offenders, okay, which is what prisons are about, especially the one on the Isle of Man. It's about there's no real rehabilitation. They'll say there is, but actually, I know what real rehabilitation looks like.
Yeah.
And I work in the field, and I haven't seen any on the other one.
Right. Yeah.
It's about managing rather than rehabilitating.
Right.
And it's very interesting what they get away with here on many levels. Am I allowed to say that? Yes, I will.
Yeah. Do you talk to the people?
I tried. I've tried.
Right. Do you feel it's somewhat deaf ears at times?
Very much so. Right across the board.
Right.
And why do you think that would be?
Okay. So,
because you say you're using the words like managing rather than rehabilitating.
Okay. So, if you're managing, you're taking people's power away and making your empire bigger, because there's always a revolving door. So, I don't know what the stats are on the Isle of Man, but if you were to look at Manx residents who are in the system, I would say with stats, you always have to look at what the stable population is and what else the off-island population is. So if you think about the stats for people on the Isle of Man, you always have a percentage of people who get nicked, go to prison, and then are sent away and never to return. Okay, so you cut them out and just go for Manx resident. What's the rehabilitation rate for those guys? Don't know. Can't find out.
Right.
Okay. So if you're...
Is that you can't find out? It's just not stats.
I don't know, because they just release.
Right.
We have a really low reoffending rate, but it doesn't count. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know. So if you're managing someone, it's about power. Okay, you feel powerful. Okay, and to get what you want, you will behave in a certain way, which also. So in a way, you're taking away the power of the person. So every time you make a judgment on someone, you're taking a little bit of their power.
Right.
Okay, does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You're taking a bit of their control away. Okay. If you're seeing 50 people a week, that's quite a substantial amount of power.
Yeah.
Okay. And it becomes addictive. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's, if you're controlling people's lives, you're not giving them the space and the skills to manage their own life. Right. Which is what strengths-based practice is.
Yeah.
And because you've been in the system for so long, doing it in a certain way, all of a sudden you're saying, actually, I've got to give them my power, which is leadership. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And if you think about a doctor making that judgment call, I'm putting a label on you. Again, it's all about power.
Right.
And if you go to the recovery capitals, this later side of thinking is this power capital or justice capital, whatever you want to call it. It's all about giving how control does someone have of their treatment, someone of their diagnosis, someone of their environment. And by giving that power back, all of a sudden people can take control of their lives rather than it being controlled by a probation officer or a GP or a psychiatrist or a mental health professional or a addiction.
And do you think when you look at the offending and misbehaviour, do you think those mechanisms are the offender trying to take control, because in their life there is chaos, so they're trying to take some control by whatever their behaviour.
So going back to, if you've been traumatized, you have a really chaotic relationship with yourself, which manifests into the world.
Okay, yeah.
And often people who are badly traumatized don't have, there's a part of them that gets stuck at a certain age. So, you know, you often run into people in their 30s or 40s who act like teenagers, because there's a part of them that's stuck there because it's never had the chance to mature. If you look at people who regularly drink and regularly take drugs, once you start taking drugs and drink, you stop maturing again, because you're pissed, or you're stoned, or you're off your head.
Okay.
So all of a sudden you're a 40-year-old you're in a 40-year-old body with a 16-year-old mindset.
Yeah. So when you look at, say, an addict, is your belief that the parents were an addict, the probability of the child being addict is gene based or more environmentally based? As in, they just pick up. You tend to obviously pick up and learn from.
So I really don't
call it a learned skill.
I'm not a fan of the term addict.
Okay.
It's someone who manifests an addictive behaviour.
Yeah, and that's the point I'm kind of trying to get at. Is that
So personally, I don't think. So it's nature and nurture. It's both.
Yeah.
So you can be predisposed to have an addictive tendency. Trauma will bring it on. And it doesn't have to be the massive trauma. It can be lots of little ones. Pain's pain, you know. And it's both. So nature and nurture is also environment. So if you're in a really stressful job, or you're doing all the time, all of a sudden the only way you can manage the ups and downs is with drugs, maybe. You know. There's even people become addicts because they're trying to performance enhancer. So, you know, athletes or politicians. I was going to say Trump, but you know, there's drugs there.
Yeah.
You know, which enhance your performance.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're used to taking a drug to numb yourself or to perform more.
Yeah. Right.
You know, for me, I always mix, you know, so by the time I got out of the mental health ward when I was 26, ended up going to Ireland, ended up getting loads of trouble in Ireland.
What made you go to Ireland?
Running away.
Okay.
Yeah, geographicals. You always bring yourself with you. So ended up working as an enforcer for a drug gang.
All right, wow.
Ended up getting nicked for conspiring to dispose of a body.
Right.
Ended up on the heroin. Yeah, complete mess.
Right.
Drinking a bottle of whiskey a day when I was ashore.
Right.
So yeah, it was pretty chaotic.
Yeah, right.
So.
And that, I presume, again, it's naturally just mixing in those circles then puts you in these situations where you're doing kind of this work, in inverted commas, to get money to buy drugs, to commit more crime, to.
So there was part of that, but it was also somewhere to belong.
Yeah,
someone to have friends who understood your pain.
Okay,
we never talked about.
Yeah, there was no. But we sat around a table.
Yeah. And it was, you know, we numbed together, we partied together, we got into fights together, and there was this, you know, there was a brotherhood, maybe.
Yeah.
You know.
And I know you said there you moved away to Ireland to kind of get away from it all. Was there an initial trying to do something different, should we say, or was it?
I was working on the fishing boats to begin with, so I was working on fishing boats here, so that would have been 97 maybe, and the heroin was getting quite bad on the Isle of Man then, and I could see the path I was going to end up going down, so I decided to run to the furthest corner of Europe, which is the Dingle Peninsula, and within a month I was knocking around with the wrong people. Within a year I was getting into all sorts of mischief.
So it's interesting then, sorry Matt, that leaving here and that heroin and go down that bad path, so is it obviously enough self-awareness there that for whatever chaos is going on and whatever trouble you're getting into, you're like, well, I don't want to go down that path though. It doesn't look great.
I don't know. I suppose there was so much. It was, seeing the people who I was hanging around with really rapidly deteriorating,
Right.
and then recognizing that the only way to get away with it was actually to leave.
All right, okay.
And then ended up being in Ireland and being in exactly the same situation and embracing it.
Right.
So,
When you first got to Ireland, like job-wise, I presume, did you actually go and try and integrate with society, if that's the right term?
So it was a deep sea fisherman.
All right.
So I would be at sea for 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks at a time.
Right.
Come ashore for a week, then I'd be at sea for 3 or 4 weeks.
So I presume when you're onshore, you're offshore, sorry, or onshore, you're drunk,
Off your head.
doing drugs. Yeah. So that, I mean, you, again, as an observer, there's this detox process. When you're at sea, then you're doing a bit of that out at sea as well.
No, I'm not. I'm neither confirming or denying.
Right. Okay.
So it's
You're in international waters. You're fine.
But it was when I was at sea, I couldn't get in trouble.
Couldn't
Get in trouble.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was ashore, I would be getting in trouble every day.
Right. Okay.
And on those boats, were they big boats? As in, were you surrounded by a lot of people with, let's say, similar mindsets?
Yeah.
Or right, okay.
Yeah. So there was crew.
Is that the nature of that job?
Yeah.
Is it
6
Right.
to 8 of us, and
Right.
we were either druggies or drinkers or dry. If that makes sense. So
Yeah. Right.
and it was chaos. And none of us were ever killed.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fall overboard or whatever.
I got shot. I got shot in the gear one day.
Oh, right.
So I went out
Okay.
the back of the boat in the gear.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
It's like what's that program on Discovery where they go fishing up, crab fishing.
Like dead
catch.
Yeah. And you see instances where they get appendages caught in the gear, basically. Yeah. So, and I assume, I don't know, maybe they're all off their head. I don't know, but you assume they're not. So yeah, when you got that edge on you as well, I'd have thought.
It's a hangover, which is it's because
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
I've had one of them,
Yeah.
or 2 or 3.
Yeah. It's that for every up there's an equal and opposite down.
Right.
And if you're up for a week, you're down for a week.
Right. So one of the things you touched on there, whether you particularly want to go in and you talk about disposing of a body, was that just helping someone that?
So just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
And through the thought process, was there I'm just helping a mate sort something out, or was this is wrong?
So I suppose that's the question: is you can know something's wrong in your head, but because you're numb because of the trauma, it doesn't feel wrong.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well,
so there's the two of them. Two of them are balanced.
Yeah.
What I did was completely wrong. Should never have got involved. Should never put myself in a position. I was helping a mate.
Yeah.
On one level. On another level, I had been working for that guy on and off for a couple of years. So it was,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's just a thought process or how much there is a thought process. I don't know.
I was sucked in, and I was in so deep when I found out what was actually why he wanted me to come to Cork that I was fucked one way or the other.
Right. And when you said you were nicked, was that in relation to that incident or just the general chaos that was going on?
So that was that. So I'd actually realised the writing was on the wall and had left where I was living and was trying to find another boat in another port.
Right.
And got sucked back into it.
Right.
So.
Is there a point, like, during all that, you kind of, it's always me this, why do I always end up in these situations? Or you're aware, or you're not aware enough of just, because you hear stories of people going, I always end up with, I don't know, if you've got a partner, I always end up with the same situation, basically, and really the consistent factor in that is you, not the situation.
But it's the and it's the underlying trauma. It's the lack of a sense of belonging. It's the lack of relationship to all of you. And I think again, it's nature and nurture. It's you can come out of the womb in a certain way, and then stuff happens, and it just magnifies what's already been programmed into you.
Yeah.
Did I have the self-awareness? No.
No. Right.
No. In fact, there was many parts of me that quite enjoyed that life.
Right.
You know,
Excitement to it, like you said, a brotherhood. Friends
drink,
felt belonging, and all the
free
naughty
drink,
things.
free drugs, lots of women, lots of cash. There's a part of you that it's
reaffirms that it's the right thing,
and it's more addictive than many of the drugs.
Right.
You know.
So you went. Do you go to prison over there?
So I ended up being remanded for a few months. Then I was bailed. I was bailed to the Isle of Man.
Right.
Then that was...
Were your family, like your brothers, talking to you at this stage, or they kind of disowned you?
Yeah, so my brother had sort of disowned me, my sister had disowned me, most of my family didn't talk to me.
Looking back, can you understand?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got back, my dad bailed me to the Isle of Man just before Millennium Eve, and I came back and just started again.
Right. And will they I asked the question earlier about in the earlier 20s, did a kind of family member shake and you go, and you need to get this right? But those conversations happening, of course, you just not in out one of you, but the theory.
And it was just not, it didn't register.
Right. No.
So I got back just before the Millennium Eve, and then in February 2000, I had a fatal accident he brought me back from.
Right.
Got run over by a 7-ton dumper truck.
Right, okay.
Hit me on the right side, dragged me under, went over my pelvis, over my chest, spat me out, broke me back, smashed everything.
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
At work accident?
Yeah, it was a Saturday morning.
Right. Just one of those hangover days?
Yeah.
Right.
So, I was driving the dumper, but don't tell anybody.
Right. You weren't basically. You weren't at the moment you went under it.
So I came off and went under.
Okay. Right.
So I was out of action for 6 months, maybe.
Right. Okay. So then, when you're in some hospital for a while, is there I use the word detox, but is there I need something? I need. Because of morphine. More morphine, please.
More morphine.
Right.
Spray.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, and the pain relief and
it's just a substitute, I assume, for the free.
Yeah, free. And then I signed myself out of hospital, and
Right.
How long did I do? So I was remanded, bailed here, then sentenced. So sentenced to the High Court of Dublin, ended up getting sentenced to 18 months.
Right. So did you have to serve that time over there? Right.
Came out.
And is that... I'm sure the prison is different there, is it?
Yeah, so I was in the Joy for a bit, which is very much like the old Victoria Road.
Okay.
And then I got moved to a pretty modern nick called Wheatfield. So because I was doing a set amount of time, I could do my qualifications as a welder. Mm-hmm. So I did my qualifications as a welder, welding all the barred gates for all the prisons in Ireland.
Oh, right, okay.
Which made me giggle.
Yeah, a few loose joints in it.
So had all my exams ready for the last 2 weeks of my sentence. And
did you get drugs in prison?
Oh, yeah.
Easily. Yeah. So the thought of like training there through prison, I mean, outside life's pretty chaotic outside of prison. I mean, it's the thought process while you're in there. I mean, why are you doing the welding?
Because you
something
get,
to do,
you
is
get,
it?
You get something to do, you get paid.
Right, okay. Right.
But it also means you've got a trade when you come out.
Right.
So in a way,
and was that going through your head, or well, I can get back and get a trade and
I don't
try and be more on the straight and narrow?
So the last 2 weeks I was going to take all my welding exams, my coding and everything else, so internationally recognised qualifications. And 2 days before, they said, you're going back to the Isle of Man tomorrow, you're getting early release.
Oh, great. Can I stay?
No, not at all. So that would just, it's one of those things in life, So again, got back to the Isle of Man, ended up working for a building firm for a bit, tried getting me qualifications.
Is it difficult getting jobs then with a criminal record? How have you found that?
So some professions or some jobs are really quite easy, and other jobs are really hard.
Right. Would you explain your behaviour like in interviews and stuff, or
So
after? How do those conversations
So
go?
most jobs like that, you don't have an interview.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's like
just a chat. Yeah.
it's a
You
chat.
do this.
Yeah,
You do
I can
that.
do that.
Yeah,
I can dig holes in the
crack
ground.
on.
You know, you don't. You know, anything in an office, anything in a shop, anything which you're going to get a DBS check for, it's not even worth applying.
Oh,
for.
okay. Right. Okay.
And there's certain firms that are known to give people jobs. So ended up working in a building job for a bit. But that chaos carried on, brought the chaos back with me, went back to my old life pretty quickly, got a bit of a reputation for myself.
I suspect you had that before, but
Yeah,
go on.
yeah, so my understanding of...
When you came back, sorry for that time you were away, did you come back and loop into pretty much the people you knew before you went?
Yeah.
Not all the same crowd.
And there was, you know, it's... People move on. It's, you know, if you go away for 18 months, lots of people move on, and the ones who were stuck in the same cycle as you were. So when I came back, it was very much... most of the guys I'd been hanging around with who were not as messed up as the rest of us had got out, got married. One of them had kids, and I came back in full chaos mode.
All right.
You know, and then the violence and the being a bad bugger.
Right.
You know, I just survived in the city, Nick, for 18 months.
Yeah. Right. So I was going to ask a question about the Nick. Is that, I mean, again, no experience of it. What was life like? Again, because I assume all that control's taken away from you, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it's feeding the problem, but again, it's not helping the problem.
No, it's in some
you
ways.
Just have your head down, going right. I've just got 18 months of this.
So prison's easier than being sectioned. So when you're sectioned, you don't have a date on the door. Okay.
You have to have
You don't have a date on the door when you're sectioned.
Okay.
So you just...
And when you're sectioned, then are you mentally playing out, trying to
escape.
look better than you are, if that's the right word. Escape.
Escape.
Oh, right. Okay. right.
Well, in prison, you get a date on the door.
Okay.
Yeah. Two different mindsets. You know, I can do this. I've been through a lot worse. 18 months, I can...
Yeah, right.
The violence in prison is more pronounced. Right. So the joy was pretty rough. Right. I was a big chap and quite muscular in those days, and a reasonably good fight.
Right.
I used to be quite handy.
Right.
And I got into scraps.
Right.
A lot of the kicking off. So, you know, if the kicking off against the officers is about them controlling you, and you not getting what you want. But between prisoners, there's a different dynamic going on, and a lot of that's about control and power. What gang you work for, who your mates are, and you know, I've seen people stabbed. I've seen people proper snooker balls in the socks.
Right.
It's what it is.
It's not pretty.
Yeah, and all of that's traumatizing.
There's no rehabilitation. It's just almost the opposite effect.
Yeah,
right.
And the more control you manifest onto someone's life, the more you traumatize them. If you think about it. Yeah. So it's just a vicious circle going round and round.
Yeah, because I was going to say that distortion, should we say, of the world you had early, you know, talking when you were early back on, and that view you had where you kind of just in your own mind. Did that just? I presume that just never really went away. You never really got to, because you're saying in parts where you recognised, so you left, but then it came back again, and then you tried to get another. You know, tried to get a job, and then it went back. So I'm just seeing that. Was there ever a time where that was a constant, or
so? I suppose if you go into my mid-20s, when I was at the worst of my mental health problems, a lot of it was about the madness in my head and how my looking at the terminology I would use today as a therapist, my sense of self had shattered through the crap that I'd gone through. When I got out of the mental health system, sort of, what happened was my sense of self, in a way, sort of came together in a way that allowed me to survive. Okay, and the only way you could survive was regular drugs, regular drink, regular medication, regular weed. And that continued to 2005. There was despair, there was rage, there was grief, maybe. And all those really powerful, intense emotions made the washing machine in my head spin at 1,000 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah. The only way I knew how to manage the washing machine in my head was by medicating.
Yeah, right.
Whether it was prescribed or it was illicit, or whether it was booze.
Right.
When I found that stability to take a job, I had a job. A long-term job was 3 months. A long-term relationship was 2 nights.
Right.
Okay, that was how chaotic my life was.
So you mentioned earlier, I think the age you used was 35, which I assume was a watershed. So maybe starting with that, but just again, I suppose we chatted before we came on, was I always think it's helpful to talk about the background to understand the context of where the journey then takes you from 35, which seems a lot more positive than what we've just been talking about for the last 45 minutes. So what moment was there where it was, or was there a moment where you went?
This will make you laugh. So I was causing so much grief on the Isle of Man. I was becoming the police's favourite target. A few things happened, and I decided that it was time to get my act together. So I decided to go and live in Holland and act as...
So the running away again.
Running away again. I was going to see my best friend in Holland before I joined the French Foreign Legion. That was the plan.
Oh, right, okay.
So I ended up going to Holland and staying for 6 months. Then, when I was in Holland, I realised, actually, if I stayed in the life, I'd be dead.
Right.
So I was 32. Ended up giving the chaplain at the mental health unit I was in a ring, and who was back in the UK. So I went and stayed with them for a few months just to get my head together.
Right.
And then came back here 2005 and signed on with DAT, signed on with Nash in those days, who else? Mental health, and it was just revolving door stuff. And then on the 5th of May 2005, so I was 33, ended up talking to a guy called Arthur, and he explained everything about how I presented to the world and how I experienced myself in a language that
You'd never heard before.
I'd been using to myself for the last 20 years. Okay, so he got how I felt, and the reason he got how I felt was because he'd gone through exactly the same.
Right.
So I went off to a Christian rehab.
So what was Arthur?
Arthur was a guy who'd set up a Christian rehab in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Called Starus, and he was a guy came over to run the local Starus meeting, so he'd come over every 6 weeks.
Would you call that a defining moment then?
5th of May 2005, right. Bang, there you go. So ended up going off to his rehab for 6 weeks, and in a way I grew up.
Right, okay.
So I came back and went back straight to it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, got nicked for attempted murder about 3 weeks later.
Right.
Ended up in Victoria Road. And when I was sat there, and the interesting bit, when I got nicked, it was 5 days after the incident. I told the truth. I didn't make any bullshit up. I just basically told the truth from what had happened all the way through, and they charged me with attempted murder. So I'm bailed. My mum's dying of cancer. No, so I'm remanded and my mum's dying of cancer, and I'm sat in prison, and I thought to myself, all the energy I put into that life for the last however many years, I'm going to put into healing myself.
Right.
The shrinks are useless. The probation they're all useless. None of them can heal me. The only person who can heal me is myself.
Right. Okay. And has Arthur said that to you when you spoke
No,
to him?
no, I've worked it out for myself.
Right. Okay.
So two things happened. I met Arthur on the 5th of May, and I met a guy called Mill. I think it was on the 7th of May. So it was all the same week. Arthur talked to me about Christianity, and Mill taught me how to meditate.
Okay.
Two things, same, there may be a God or there is a God, however you want it. And those two things changed my life. Learning to meditate and understanding faith. So when I was in prison, I meditated every day, and I got into meditating, so I might meditate for 6 or 7 hours a day.
Right. Okay.
Started talking to the chaplains.
Did it help start unfuzzing the head?
So it started to slow down the washing machine.
Okay.
You know what? Do you know what I mean by that constant churning? Okay. So that constant churning just began to slow down, and I made the conscious decision not to take any drugs when I was in prison. In fact, it was the first time I'd been completely clean, other than medication, most probably in 10 years, 15 years, if not longer. So
that was just through willpower.
Pardon?
That was
just
through
willpower.
willpower.
So they dropped the charge from attempted murder down to GBH with intent, so I could get bailed. And there was some quite strict bail conditions, so I had a curfew 6 p.m. I had to sign on at the police station every night. There was, so I got, my mum had me out for about 9 months before she died. Then was going to plead not guilty to GBH with intent, and the court, the police offered, or the Attorney General's office offered my solicitor a deal that if I pleaded guilty to GBH, that they would take into consideration he attacked me, but I went over the top in my defence.
Right.
And I said, I'll take that. Get a couple of years. It is what it is. So anyway, went to court, and they gave me 1 year suspended for 2.
All right. Okay.
And during all of this, I'd been tested for dyslexia, so I was learning to read and write.
Was that part of I use the word defence, part of, look, he's demonstrating he's trying to rehab here?
So I'd set up a little gardening business. I was going to church 2 or 3 nights a week. I was helping a starus. What else was I doing? So I was doing the meditation. I was doing all loads of stuff, and putting all that energy into taking control of my life for the first time.
That feel empowering at the time?
Oh, absolutely. Then I'm just trying to think what happened then. So all those things sort of built, and I was here. So that would have been October 2006, and I got 1 year suspended for 2. So I then helped with what's now Gry.
Okay.
Gry Homeless Hostel in Douglas. Okay. You guys know?
No.
Okay. So me and 3 other guys got together 2006 and helped set up what's now the Homeless Hostel. And just doing those things and serving others rather than serving my ego. If that makes sense.
At that stage, did you feel you had to start giving back? Or do you think it was just part of that healing process?
I think it was part of that healing process. I also think it was about service. So how often what we do is about us and our egos rather than this is for you. There is no cost. So middle of 2007, I realised I needed to deal with my past. So that was just, there was so much junk.
I bet.
So I applied to 4 or 5 different places to go and do courses. I couldn't get to rehab. I didn't fit the criteria to be sent to rehab. So
that would have been a government funded
yeah.
send you here for 6 months type of thing.
Oh, 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to a Roman Catholic institute and doing a qualification in counselling, community formation and spiritual direction.
And to go and do that yourself, was that because you've been through the system, maybe you spoke to people previously and you just go back to that thing you mentioned earlier about, I need to go and do these things rather than waiting for the system to sort me out?
So the system wasn't going to sort me out. I'd had enough experience. This was like, let's see what will happen if I... So I wrote 5 letters. 4 got back to me and said, no, we haven't got anything. And then I got another one from a place called the Institute of St Anselm in Margate in Kent, and they said, yes, come down for an interview. So they said, okay, you're open-minded enough. So there was 55 of us on the course from 23 nations, and I was the only one with an English accent.
Oh, right, okay.
So
is that something you pay for, or what?
So tried to get the government to pay for it, which wasn't going to happen, and then out of the blue, someone offered to pay for it. So £7,500. There you go. Off you go. Did a year there. Then came back for a bit, and because I'd been hanging around with nuns, monks, and fathers for a year, I decided I needed to go and test my vocation as a monk.
Right.
So ended up going to the most austere Anglican monastery in the world, and over a 3-year period, I spent about 2 years there. The longest being a year. Right. So silent, so no talking.
I was going to say, what do you do there? Right. Okay.
So you get up and you chant and you pray and you meditate, and there's a bit of farming going on.
And as this is going on, is this washing machines continuing to slow down?
Slow down. And a deeper and deeper sense of connection happens with yourself and everything around you. And you begin to understand. So religion goes from being a belief or a faith to a lived experience. So you're aware of what many people would call God.
Okay.
You're aware of the influences on you and the influences which are positive and which are negative.
From what? Your environment?
From
people
your
around?
environment, from the spiritual realm.
Okay.
So a very orthodox Christian desert father type spirituality. So very ancient, not the modern stuff with it. So a very ancient.
I don't know either. So I assume I know nothing.
So if you go back to 350 AD, there was a split within the church. Okay. You have the ones that became Roman Catholicism, and then the Protestant church, which followed a certain spirituality and a certain belief structure. And then you had the guys who walked into the desert. That's why they're called the Desert Fathers. And they set up the early monasteries and have a more experiential knowledge of this, of God, of the Bible. So it's about a direct experience. So you don't need a priest or the Bible to meet God. You can meet God directly through prayer and meditation. Okay, if that makes any sense to you? So that very orthodox spirituality has been the bedrock of my journey for the last, what year were we in now? For 11 years maybe.
Right. And can I ask, because again, religion's not an area I've ever looked into, or when you use the word God, what context is that seen as?
So
because I'd imagine there's just different forms depending on the religion you're in.
So for me, God is about relationship with something outside of myself. whether you want to call it God the Father, God the Son, or God the Spirit. There's 3 different things you can relate to. And for me, I have a certain type of relationship with all 3, and I can't go any further than that, because if I start talking about it, I just won't make sense.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So
I suppose then, I mean, my parents have brought up a Christian.
Yeah.
We went to church till I was 12, and I've never since then ever really interacted with church other than a funeral and a wedding. And that when God's talked about it's a guy, and you pray to him, and that's only in the depth of my knowledge, because I have no knowledge about it. So just the way you were talking about God, I didn't know it was
So I don't actually like the word God, because it has so much context.
Yeah, and that's why I get the impression the context I think it is not how you're describing it.
Yeah.
That's why I asked the question.
So my context is God is relationship.
Yeah.
And
it's not some being somewhere.
No.
Well,
It may be about being, but
it's
it's not about
a human being.
It's I suppose for me it's about trust.
Right. Trust with what, other people or yourself?
Trusting trusting the divine to meet my needs, trusting that the next step is the right step.
Okay.
Since I've been on since I've been at the monastery, it's been that the journey since then has been utterly, you could make some of the things up which have happened, but it's all about trust.
Right. So you mentioned a few years at the monastery.
Yeah, so was at the monastery.
Where was that? Remind me, sorry.
So it's near, the nearest place is Gatwick Airport.
Okay.
So
right.
you know where Gatwick Airport is?
Yeah.
It's about 10, 15 miles from there. So
you spend a few months there, come back a few months?
I started, I did a week, I did a month, I did 3 months, and then I did a year, then I did 3 months, and then I was there on and off for most of 7 months, 8 months. And then I found out that the qualification I'd done at St Anselm's qualified me to go and do a master's at the University of East Anglia in counselling and psychotherapy.
Okay, right.
So the plan was that I would leave the monastery, come back to the Isle of Man for a bit, and then I would go to uni. But because of my past, there was a lot of bureaucracy getting me in. Eventually, I got the funding and I got the place, and I went up to Norwich in 2011.
Right.
And qualified as a therapist, BACP accreditation, and got a master's degree.
And as you're learning those things,
Yeah.
I assume everything you've gone through just like a jigsaw, does it start, the pieces start? Yeah, right.
So all those bits falling in, then some really good, more
I imagine the immense satisfaction is kind of like, oh, right, yeah, okay, that, and it's
but
just...
also doing the work. So you've got to do the work on yourself to be able to do, be a therapist. And it was simple things. So being trauma informed, I used it for term activated. So certain situations that you get all. And I kept getting activated going into uni, and I couldn't work out what it was. And then I was sat just pondering.
Is that cognitive behaviour then that you're trying to change?
It's not about. It's about this inside of you there being an energy that gets activated because it resonates with something in the past. And it's the
key to match those two things up. And
what
then
are the two?
Yeah, right.
So
okay.
that activation is a step to heal them. So every time I walked into the building I was taught, I used to get activated, and I could feel the anger, and I couldn't work out what it was. And then I was sat just meditating, and then I realised what it was.
Right.
Concrete block walls with just the lines of cement. Okay. Mm-hmm. Most public buildings have them, including prisons.
Yeah.
Okay, I know what it's about now. I can let go of that.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And there was all those strange, so I hadn't done any education, and then all of a sudden I'm on this pathway of getting a master's. Met a woman, so I didn't go back to the monastery. So I ended up doing that for a year full time. Then I went down to live in Canterbury with Gabby, and was down in Canterbury from 2012 to 2016.
Right.
So I ended up doing lots of peer mentoring stuff, consulting.
So talking about your experiences and then obviously mentoring people through
it, working a bit as a therapist.
Right.
So I worked on therapeutic communities, some of the big third sector guys did.
What's third sector guys?
So big third sector organisations.
Expand
So
a bit more on
big
that.
charities that big
Right.
charities. Lots of mentoring, lots of psychological support, and it was really quite interesting being in London. You know, so I used to travel up to London 3 times a week. Then I was doing some scholarship work. So the Longford Trust helps ex-offenders go to prison. So what they help fund me go. So ex-offenders go to uni, so they help fund me to go to uni. So I then helped them. So I mentored some of them.
Right, okay.
Ended up working as a doorman, which was a bit bizarre. And just was living life, you know.
I presume on this constant journey of getting more and more information and knowledge and understanding.
And got into a bit of corporate work.
Right. Your relationships back with the family during this period, were they starting to heal? Were you working on them?
Yeah.
Right.
So me and my brother get on. Me and my sister get on. My dad and me started to see eye to eye for the first time. And there was all the, there was a journey. There's no magic bullet. It's a journey because trust's earned, not given. You know, and if you've abused the trust as badly as I had abused the trust, all of a sudden it takes a lot of work to get it to be full.
Of course.
I presume when you're back from the monastery into let's say normal day routines life, was there ever a part of your mind that was nagging, just niggling in the back of you, saying?
Still to this day.
Right.
Okay, so within the monastery there's a discipline, and that discipline's about getting up and meditating and praying and doing that cycle. There's a daily cycle, there's a weekly cycle, there's a monthly cycle, there's a yearly cycle, and then there's another cycle above that. And for me, that cycle is in my life, and up to lockdown, I still go back to the monastery. It's my place where I can just go and be. I can turn all my phones off and I can just rejoin that rhythm.
Right.
I
think you'll always need that.
I struggle without it.
Right.
There's a part of me that would go back tomorrow.
Right.
I'll be honest, there's a part of me, if there you go, all the things I do, if that all stopped, I would be happy. The Hermitage as well, not just the monastery. I'd go to the Hermitage.
Right. Okay.
And in many ways, a lot of the self-discipline I learned at the monastery keeps me doing what I do. I have quite an active life. I help run a charity. I'm a therapist. I do all the things, and it's only the discipline of being in the monastery and that meditative stuff.
So do you feel you need that discipline then?
It allows me to operate in a really efficient way, and allows me to do my job. If I didn't have that discipline, what would happen? I don't know. So
So Quing, where did that thought process come from?
So
maybe give the listeners a bit of background.
Okay, here's one for you. This is a typical Graham. So I'm in London. I've got a couple of really quite good jobs, and I'm thinking whether I should stay in the relationship I'm in or should I go back to the monastery. So I'm one of those. And I'd been back home to see my dad, and I was going through my bedside cabinet, and I found a stone from Flegic Beach. Have you ever done any inner child work, which is connecting with your little person inside?
Okay, no.
Okay, so there's a whole thing in personal development where you connect with your inner child. So I just done like a week inner child workshop. So I asked little Graham, what he would like to do with the stone from Project Beach. And quick as a flash, the thought in my head rises. He would like to throw it from the end of the world.
Right.
Okay, so I laughed at myself. Where is the end of the world?
Yeah.
So I'm in work the next week, and the guy I was working for says, having this conversation, said something along the lines, he's talking about the Camino. Do you know the Camino?
Mm.
So there's a place in Spain you can do a pilgrimage
Oh,
to,
right, okay.
which is called the Camino.
Yeah.
And he said he always regretted not walking to Cape Finisterre after he got to Santiago. And because I'd been in the monastery, I have a little bit of Latin, which I know Finisterre means finish of terror, which is finish of earth. So I've just found the end of the world.
Okay, yeah, right.
So it was one of those bizarre ones. Then I thought to myself, so I'm going to have to get permission from my girlfriend. I'm going to have to find some cash to pay everything for 3 or 4 months. And I'm going to have to get permission from work. And in 6 weeks, all of them arrived.
Right.
So I set off from Canterbury and walked to the west coast of Spain, 4 months, 2,000 miles.
Right. With the stone.
With a stone
Yeah, right.
and a shell. Through the... So...
Is that done as part? I used the word tour. It's Paul, but with other people. Or was it
No,
just
no. So the first month I was by myself. I was the only pilgrim, and I walked from Calais through the jungle.
Okay.
To a place called Vézelay, where I met some more pilgrims, and then I walked across France to the Pyrenees. Then I walked along the ridge of the Pyrenees, then across the north coast of Spain, and then went over the Pico de Europe to Santiago, and then out to Finisterre. So the first month I was by myself, then I was about 6 or 7 of us within a day of each other, so we got to know each other. And then hit the Pyrenees, I was by myself for a week, and then I was 1 or 200. Then I got to Santiago, and there was probably by the time I was there, there were 15 of us within a day of each other. And then from Santiago out to Cape Finisterre, there was most probably 10 of us on the road.
Right.
So it was just depending where you were. So about 2/3 of the way across France, I got a random friend request on Facebook. Don't know you. You're 16 years old and you have peroxide blonde hair. I'm not going to be your friend. Okay, a day later, I get another friend request. Must be the daughter of one of my friends. Wondering how my walk's going. So I said yes, and then I got a message. Hi Graham, I was wondering if you're going out with my mum Alison Fletcher in 1998 because I think you're my dad.
Whoa.
So yes, I was going out with her mum, and yes, I am her dad.
Wow.
So she was living in Ireland, and wanted to come live with me, and where I was. So I got back from the walk. My girlfriend couldn't cope with me having a daughter. So that was the end of the relationship, and my dad was getting old, and I was like, actually, I might as well move home. So my daughter came to live with me for a while, and then decided to go back to Ireland. And my dad died about 2 years ago. So it was 2 years before he died. So yeah, so lots of it was just one of those. So yeah.
What was that like, finding that out?
Oh, nuts.
Bear in mind, obviously you're walking, you kind of
and
not focused on what you're doing, but you're doing this thing, and then this left field thing comes from nowhere.
But doing the Camino, things like that happen, I've been told.
Right, okay.
So the answer to the question wasn't, do I go back to the monastery or find the strength to stay in the relationship, was actually, what do I do when I discover I have a daughter who wants to come and live with me? It was just, I don't speak any French, and I was in the middle of France, and there was nobody who spoke English, so I actually had to live with it.
Process it yourself.
Process it by myself while I walked.
Right. And if you don't mind asking, why did she reach out?
So her gran told her on her 16th birthday that who she thought her dad wasn't really her dad.
Wow.
And she'd been in care since she was 11.
Oh, right, okay.
So very complex.
Right. And the journey, obviously, at that stage you've been through, she'd obviously gone through a care system. was the things that in her life that you can kind of
Oh yeah,
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 right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, and it was really quite strange. So I could see myself
That's
in
what the
her.
factories in the care system says that
Yeah,
it wasn't,
yeah,
not a white picket fence,
yeah,
but not
yeah,
a perfect,
yeah.
you know.
So it was quite interesting that I could see her trying to do exactly what I'd done at that age.
Right. Would she listen to you though?
Oh no, not at all.
Right. So the starting of you obviously came back to the Isle of Man, yeah.
Came back, started working for a local provider 1 day a week. Got to know the system, and after being in London for 4 years, it was like walking back to the Stone Age.
Oh right, okay.
Mental health, addiction, offending. It was, and in many ways, it was what you took for granted in the UK, especially in the southeast, just didn't exist here. And because I'd worked in a certain space and how it, had the right contacts, it was all of a sudden it was actually, let's bring some proper strength and asset based practice to the Isle of Man, and we've been doing that ever since,
Right.
with some success. So yeah.
So how does that work? How do people get involved?
Maybe
headlines if it's a long
okay,
one, but as long as you need it to be.
Okay, so I suppose we're four things. One is we're a therapeutic community, so we teach people who might struggle with social skills or making healthy relationships how to be social. Okay, we have a social space, which is about having a safe space to experiment in how you socialise.
Okay.
Yeah. So the therapeutic community also helps you deal with the underlying trauma. So it's a multifaceted thing, really. We're an education centre, so we have bespoke accredited qualifications in peer mentoring. And what else do we do?
Is that for the pathway, should we say, for being a counsellor and that sort of side, or is it all?
So it's more. So it's about. In many ways, it's about transferable skills. So if you can learn to listen well, so this thing with the talking benches, which is going on at the moment, it makes me giggle. It should be called listening benches. Okay, so go and sit on it to listen, not to talk. So it's about people understanding addiction, mental health, and offending. It's about, if you've got the lived experience, using it in a healthy way. It's understanding how society puts things onto you, and it gives you the skills to work in a really effective way, but all the skills are transferable. So even if you never end up being a peer mentor, those skills can be used in work, they can be used in just normal social situations. What else? I'm just trying to think. And we have a peer-led community, so people who have been through the mill or find themselves isolated or want to overcome challenges need to build fun things into their lives, because often they have no fun. So the guys, they have a walking club, they have a hiking club, they do art, we have a whitewater kayaking club. So it's like a student union nearly. So you can just, if you have an idea, tell us what you want to do, and we'll support you while you do it. We won't do it for you, but you do it yourself. So we also have counselling, and we also do community development, because everybody who comes to Quing lives in a geographical community somewhere.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things with the recovery capital model is you can build it into individuals, but you can also build it into communities. And once you start looking at that gets really interesting, because communities vary through time with how much recovery capital they have.
Okay. Let's expand then. I know we talked about recovery capital earlier. How does that work on a bigger scale? Like you talked about an individual building that.
Yeah,
okay. How do you build it at a community level?
So as a community,
and again, sorry to just pick on point. Just when you talk about community, you're talking about, say, a village.
Okay. So if you think about the cul-de-sac you live on, how many people do you know in that cul-de-sac?
Yeah, not many, but go on.
Okay, so what would happen if you became friends with every person who lives on your cul-de-sac.
Okay, so that's your building, your community there.
So that's you building community.
Okay.
Okay. That's one way of forming a community. So how do you get to know everybody on your street?
Go knock on the door.
Or you have a party.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's simple things like that. If you
Right.
do that at a real hyper local level, all of a sudden people... So the research is utterly fascinating. So if you put a community connector into GP surgery, within 6 months, 25% decrease in GP appointments. So 25% of people who go to a GP appointment are lonely, and that's why they go.
Oh,
Okay,
right.
45% decrease in A&E admissions. Okay, old people are far less likely to end up in homes. So, loneliness is loneliness is the same unhealthiness as smoking 18 fags a day.
Right.
Okay, so being lonely kills people. But so if you connect people with their neighbours, all of a sudden you're building all that social capital, which makes people healthy. And if you do the methodology, so we have a methodology nearly, it's maybe the right word. So there's a way of working. So you increase all of the capital. So it's about how much people feel in control of their environment, how their material capital, their physical resources increase. All of the capitals can be increased by doing really simple stuff.
And not to feel like the pessimist, but how did you find the uptake for that? Was it a community came to you and asked for it, or did you go out to the community?
So we've been doing it on the Isle of Man. We started 3 years ago, and we're now working with Russian and Arbury commissioners. Okay. So we're in the middle of developing a learning site down there with them, with our international partners. So we use an evidence-based methodology. It's called asset-based community development. And we've been working with Cormac for 3 years. So we used some really, really simple stuff during lockdown with Russian and Arbury. And it was really interesting, the feedback and the amount of people who volunteered. So
it's all been positive,
and it's been massive. Yeah. It's been massive. So green and orange bits of paper in your window. Yeah. Okay, green means everything's all right. Oranges I've got a bit of a problem. Can you help? And the thing that people talked about was, as I went out for my daily exercise, I knew all my neighbours, even though I didn't know who they were. I knew all my neighbours were all right because they told me. Yeah. Okay. And from that, we've got some internationally recognised training going on down in Russian and Arbury, started this week. Right. So, all those things happen.
Yeah, because exactly there, I'm in Colby, and where we were, we had all the...
That was a doubt. Yeah,
it was... I didn't realise it wasn't. I thought it was island-wide, but... No. Yeah, whenever we go out and walk the dogs every day... It was just that, just as you said, in the nice way. I don't know all my neighbours, but looking down, knowing that.
Did you know what they were? When they saw them?
Yes, we got a thing through to say, put this up for green's good, and it was. When you look back at it, it was good.
And the really interesting bit with that was, it went to every parishioner in Arbury and Russian, and we caught people who had fallen through the nets of mental health, through the mental social care. Southern Befrienders, through everybody, and we were catching people who'd fallen through all the nets.
Okay.
And then they got the support with it. And it was, something as simple as that.
Yeah, it's amazing simple, isn't it? Yeah. So that's Quing's a registered charity?
Oh, yeah, so we're a registered charity. We're also a limited company to keep everything sweet with governance. Yeah. So we're operating at the old St. Thomas's School at the bottom of Crellins Hill. So we're open 10 to 4, and if you want to come down and have a cup of coffee, you're more than welcome. I'm actually off work this week. So
this will be out in a couple of weeks.
Okay,
so late October.
Okay, so we're running a level 1 between now and Christmas, but we'll run a 4-day just after Christmas, and then another level 1. So,
And funding wise, is that all just trying to raise or difficult?
It's meant so it's a nightmare over here trying to raise money. So you because we're using a model that's not well known.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So in the UK, so all commissioning in the UK is now strengths-based and asset-based practice. Okay, we don't have that in the Isle of Man yet. So they are only getting their heads around strengths-based practice at the moment. So we find it hard to get funding. We've been operating with no help from the government for 3 years. Yeah, it's a complete nightmare.
And private funding, that's the right word. It's a similar battle of not convincing people, but explaining to people the benefits of this approach.
Yeah. You know, and all the stats are there.
Yeah.
Right. Who would not like to see a 95% decrease in crime?
Yeah.
Okay. Who would not like to see a 25% decrease in GP appointments?
Yeah.
So the therapeutic community model we use comes from Slough.
Right.
And their first 100 people, so it's called Embrace down in Slough, recognised model with the Royal College of Psychiatry, which we're in the process of doing. So we're becoming an accredited therapeutic community with the Royal College of Psychiatry at the moment. So first 100 people through their system saved, I think it was just under £3 million in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody wants to give us anything.
Yeah.
So.
And during your looking back now, let's say today, and looking back over those kind of healing years from 35, did you struggle at times to deal with, I use the word letting your past go, but not letting it haunt you,
So
being able to move on from it? Because again, that's almost another trauma on top of all the other traumas. It's like, right, I need to accept that's happened.
okay.
I need to get my peace with certain people, maybe families or whatever,
yeah.
but your own inner peace.
Okay, so I suppose for me, I have to learn to accept who I am, warts and all. I also have to accept some of the things that I have done which have been completely wrong. Okay, I also have to accept the things that were done to me which were completely wrong. And in many ways, it's not about reliving it.
Yeah.
It's about what were the feelings during it, and if I can let those, if I can let those feelings, if I can accept those feelings, it's I heal, I depressurize. I still get pissed off. I still get angry. I'm known to throw them at the occasional temper tantrum, but at the same time, isn't that part of being a human being?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's all right when things don't get you. Yeah, it's all right. And I'm not acting out. I'm having feelings, and I'm saying actually that's not okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Wow. Some journey. So I assume. Look forward now. You're 49. Did you say?
Yeah, I'm 49 next week.
And is this? I presume you're obviously on this. I suppose we're all on journeys in some context, aren't we? But you continue to be on that journey for yourself to continue to whatever that might be. If you call it improvement, but it's probably not the perfect term, is it?
I suppose it's about growth and roundedness.
Yeah,
it's about becoming more of who I am and becoming a more rounded person. I've often been, a question that I've been asked before: would I change anything? And I would say no, because all those events have made me who I am today, and I'm quite content of who I am today. Okay, I could do with getting paid, or I could do with some things, but actually I'm really quite content with who I am, and I like myself, and I can go and spend time with myself. What more do I need in life?
Yeah, right. So. Right. And people listening, I guess you're looking, if people want to. Well, I'm going to say people want to reach out, but you're looking for people who have just maybe got that internal or head washing machine going on, and they need a bit of direction or a bit of help to understand that.
And it's
or they're not even acting. Maybe they're aware, or they're not aware they're acting out, or they've got family members that are acting out.
It's about overcoming the challenges of life. It's that, so that washing machine in your head often goes with being emotionally numb. It's like the emotions taps being turned off. So sometimes it's about turning the emotions on so the washing machine slows down, and then giving you the practical skills to go out and flourish.
Yeah, right.
And just, as I said before, we're on Facebook, we have a website, and we just come down to St Thomas's.
Yeah, we'll add all the links in the show
Yeah.
notes. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your
definitely.
story, because, again, I think we mentioned before we came on, or when we came on, this isn't about sensationalising the story. It's about being through an experience here, and hopefully others, I'm sure you'll find out others can learn from that. And I can, you can clearly see you want to help people if you've been through 15 to 20 years of that trauma, and if you can help someone cut that short or not even get on that path, that's testimony to yourself. So I appreciate you sharing your story, because a lot of people won't as well.
Yeah.
So thanks
Thank you
for
very much.
coming in. Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll add the links.
Thank you for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. Do you want to check us out, Matt?
Yep. So wherever you're listening to us today, please like, subscribe, share, and leave those 5-star reviews, pretty please. On social media, Facebook, we're the M Word Podcast. Twitter, we are... Yeah, I know, I've got to remember that part. Twitter, we are the M Word Podcast with the number 1 after it. And then on Instagram, we are the M Word IOM.
Super. Thanks for listening, you sexy people. It's word out from Martin.
And word out from Matt.